Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. Well, how many board games are on the shelves? When I watch the large board game channels, I stare at the 300 plus games on display behind the presenters, and my own shelves tremble in dismay. Giant games with components measured in sheer tonnage. No, I don't have too many of those. Or the shelves to contain their elemental forces. I'll open this video with a game that's the same as the box I'll end the video on, a game I bought before the channel existed. Really, I'm looking at games I bought in for this channel during my 3-year setup phase and the games I kept buying inside the first year of video production. With almost 4 years of channel-related game purchases, do I now have 300 plus games on the shelves? No, far fewer than that. The larger board game channels receive endless boxes to review. Down here in the cheap seats, I've paced everything out. Tide of Iron is one of the few coffin box games in the collection. I'll discount it from the list as it wasn't bought in for the channel. Fortune and Glory qualifies. The problem with taking cumbersome game boxes off shelves is that I have to take cumbersome game boxes off shelves. This studio houses one game, Tide of Iron. Best place for it on that shelf to the left of the table. There's no rhyme, no reason, no plan to storage. I stack games on shelves as they come in. Yes, I buy separate storage for components as well, so it's a matter of finding space to bundle all the boxes and crates on a shelf. Nothing to do with theme, manufacturer, or the alphabet. It has everything to do with space for game storage boxes and expansions. If you want to store games, be realistic. Store them where they damn well fit. V Commandos brings up a point. I'm not showing you the extra storage boxes I bought or the expansion boxes. Where possible, I'm only showing you complete games instead of games plus expansions. Exception? Carson City is a big box game that comes with expansions thrown in, and you'll see that style again later. Ace Detective was the only copy on sale at a reasonable price. I bought in props for use in videos, and I'm only showing a few here just to remind viewers of the fact. Tiny Epic Kingdoms has an equally small expansion, but you don't need to see that. Under Swiss law, you must see the skull with dice inside, and that is a board gaming fact. Castle Ravenloft and the other Dungeons & Dragons board games all have their own accompanying storage boxes for endless cardboard tokens. Only the Temple of Elemental Evil gave me cause for concern. I was kneeling to reach for it and overbalanced into a crate of role-playing games behind me. After a thorough investigation of the scene, I concluded that the Elemental Evil box was too evil to take off a shelf without suffering an Omen-style catastrophe. Next time, I'll appease the gaming gods with a blood sacrifice and the roll of suitably demonic dice. There are only 2 sets on the shelves that are housed within tins. Don't put your game in a tin. This compendium was on offer, so I accepted the crime against gaming that is the tin. One day, Forbidden Desert will be boxed. Sadly, not today. I bought in chess, drafts, backgammon, and shut the box to illustrate a few points about games in my videos. Strangely, I didn't feel the need to pick up a copy of Monopoly. You'll see Elder Sign in various forms on this video. I'll point those out. Huns isn't the only game featured with a slightly misleading cover. It's not about racing your horses back and forth across the Danube. Always research the games you want to purchase. In other words, try to find a way to look at the back of the box. If the game board is pictured, you'll have a far better idea of what's on sale. I didn't just buy games. Occasionally, as with Rise of Tribes, I went after game-themed equipment. This dice tray was made specifically for the game, and it'll be a giveaway at some far-flung point. Yes, I expected King Domino and Queen Domino to be in the same sized box. For convenience of storage, obviously. You'll see a few standard box sizes thrown together on this channel to illustrate what happens when manufacturers play the standardization game. Although I'm not showing expansions here for reasons of sanity, this big box version of Istanbul comes with its expansions. At the time, it was cheaper to buy this version than it was to go after the original game plus expansions. Curiously, cost is a factor when buying stuff. I hear hunting bargains is all the rage. How covert is covert? I can neither confirm nor deny that it is or isn't. What was that shot about sanity? Shuffling game boxes for this video took me 3 hours. I was lucky to drop only that one box of D&D, and the evil temple landed on my lap as I smashed back against the crate of RPG books. No harm to the game. You won't see too much of the bonus material I bought in. I boosted the look of Vikings on board by upgrading tokens to model barrels. I dread to think how long it would take to show off the contents. Even moving swiftly from shelf to shelf, filming a game for 10 seconds and returning the game to storage, I still spent too many hours herding board games around. Moving into a cooperative phase, I'll start with Buffy and rapidly move to so many versions of Pandemic. There's a fair chunk of shelf space taken up by the expansions and all sorts of bonus material. Pandemic represents a category of game I felt worth discussing on the channel. We're all in it together versus the game's threat. Pandemic's been around long enough to spawn tentacled versions of the game, specific historical settings, and the Legacy series with permanent changes to the game state based on actions in each game played. Abstract games aren't really my thing. Games should have the capacity to tell some sort of story, though you'll find there's not much of a tale to tell in an abstracted form, in which case, let it go. You aren't looking for boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy mopes in a jazz club he set up expressly to mope around in. The story you tell instead is of who won, who lost, who drew, and of the titanic struggle in the middle of the game, a story in abstract, in other words. I find the thing that counts against abstract games for me is the winning, as well as the losing. If I lose a game, I may not realise how I lost, but I find that's also true if I win at an abstract game. How the hell did I win that one? Certain games are more thematic thanks to the components, constructing buildings in Santorini, for example. Here's an overproduced game for what it is. Gold Armada. It's an earlier version of Elder Sign by Rainer Knizia. We'll see it again in yet another form. There are several games out there featuring totem poles, and I suspect that Wakanda is the least offensive in that blotted category. Let us turn briefly to Ants. Micropolis and Ants are entirely different games that happen to feature ants. If you really pushed for it, you could make every single game in the world about ants, even the most abstract game. Time for a quick break. My main area of experience lies in role-playing games, and I'm not showing crates and crates of RPG books here. I fell into one and survived. Obviously, it was a primitive trap, and I made the roll to survive. The channel features ancient tomes and scrolls like this, Tunnels and Trolls. I deliberately bought in older RPG stuff for video purposes, but that style of purchase doesn't apply to picking up board games. Just be aware of the RPG angle. Onitama is another abstract game, but it has a martial art theme to it that helps generate epic stories on the small battlefield. Empire Engine vies with Deep Sea Adventure for the title of smallest game in the collection. All of these games shelter under the same roof, the board game roof, even if they are strictly dice-rolling games with a board added as an afterthought, or card games that create a board of sorts out of a tableau. Port Royal falls into that card game pretending to be a board game category, and Star Wars Empire vs. Rebellion is a fancy version of blackjack. Odin's Ravens creates its board out of a long line of cards. Jolly and Roger uses cardboard ships as the unofficial board. Shahrazad creates a tightly packed playing surface out of its cards. And here's another card game with a dice-rolling element. Age of War bridges the gap between Gold Armada and Elder Sign. Are all 3 games the same game? Broadly, yes. Are they all wildly different in terms of theme? Absolutely. Fungi is a card game designed by people who are clearly off their faces on suspect mushrooms. That's neither here nor there. Survive Escape from Atlantis appears to exist in its own category when it comes to box size. That may be illusory. My choice of game depends on availability, price, and the game mechanics involved. This collection has its share of cooperative games, card games, dice-rolling festivals, and games in small boxes. Manhattan Traffic and Dragon Slayer represent small games with a few rules. You slap them out and play them and tidy them away with little fuss. I chose many of these games to make gameplay easier for my Tourette collaborator, Melissa, who deals with obsessive-compulsive disorder. We'll see if the game Brothers steers her through number-based difficulties. For all parties concerned, I've placed Hive at the bottom of the screen to hide the picture of the spider on the box, and I'll be running spider-free games of that for the arachnophobes in the audience. I've often lost games of Hive while trying to win games of Hive using the spider as the winning piece. There you go, that's abstract games for you. The game of games is a game involving the storage of games on shelves. With games that have industry-standard box sizes, the game of games becomes easier on your shelves if your shelves can cope with the likes of Gingerbread House, Kashgar, or the Star Wars incarnation of Carcassonne. Hours into this quest, I closed on the final objective. The last few shelves of game beckoned, wearily. How many games did I buy in for the channel? I must ignore the first and last games in the video, and the sideways move into the RPG book I showed you. We're nowhere near the usual 300-plus games seen on the larger shelves infesting the bigger game channels. Alone was one of several Kickstarter projects I backed. Always on the lookout for different game mechanisms, I picked up a cheap copy of Olympos with its time track, allowing players to spend time on one huge action or on loads of small ones. Back to Kickstarter again with 878 Vikings, Clans of Caledonia, and The Networks, though that last one was a Kickstarter for an expansion that allowed me to pick up the original game along with it. How many board games aren't board games? House of Danger is a choose-your-own-adventure game switched from book to cards, though a board is included with the box. Café Fatal involves fate rather than fatality. Depends on the quality of the cheese wheels served at the table, I'd guess. Bushido Breaker was a Kickstarter and is a card game that turns the cards into a board representing the Lord's ninja-infested residence. Overworld is a tile-laying game. Enchanter's Overlords is a card game with a mat rather than a board. Letters from Whitechapel has another game associated with it. I wouldn't say that the Whitehall Mystery is an expansion, more of a reduction in terms of size, and a game in its own right. You might be better off playing the smaller game first before moving to the grander scope of the Whitechapel streets. Wakening Lair uses cards as the board. The 3 boxes of Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, make use of a map rather than a board, but the maps provided come along with game symbology, so that must count for something. Histrio. Histrio. Is there a board? Barely, but there's also a cardboard theatre on which playing pieces strut as they take to the stage. Black Fleet has a recognisable board. I won't turn a game away if the board is somewhat nebulous. Mission Red Planet has a round board, and that still means something in the world of games. Solenia's tiles form a regular playing surface each time, and that qualifies. Professor Evil and the Citadel of Time sticks to the tried and trusted formula of the game board, whereas Wombat Rescue makes use of tiles to get the rather abstract theme across. I'm not keeping track of all the games here that were Kickstarters at one time. Instead, I limit myself to mentioning Kickstarters I backed. 1066 Tears to Many Mothers is a tower defence game using many cards, not pictured the mat that acts as a board. Let's take a detour into the cheap seats for a moment. Here are games that I bought with little intention of playing them. I bought them for the figures. The Terminator game was so cheap, it was worthwhile buying 2 boxes of figures for use in science fiction role-playing games like Starfinder. Terminator's still going to count once on this list, though. These Magic the Gathering games are each standalone, and I bought those in for the large number of figures in the games at knockdown prices. not shown an expansion for the game. The cheapest version of that was in German, and I bought it solely for the plastic. Did I pay full price for any of these games? Setting up a channel turns the bargain hunting senses keen. K2 represents a theme running through all these games. I'm not interested in wall-to-wall games of epic conflict involving giant robotic tanks or hordes of genetically modified combat midwives. I may have misunderstood the Warhammer source material. The theme is to have many themes. I've shown you games about hunting serial killers, serving the best pizza in a cafe, saving baby wombats, climbing a mountain, exploring a cave system, building your transportation empire in Manhattan, going a-pirating, defeating tentacular horror, clearing the world of disease, preventing the fall of Rome, protecting the Netherlands from flooding, and clambering over large coloured blocks in search of victory. My plan was to talk about game mechanisms, to explain dice and dice towers to the uninitiated. There are no dexterity games here, they won't work on the channel, but cooperative games, dice rollers, one-against-many games, these I feel like discussing. Invaders has a board, though it didn't need one. With so many cards in the game, it could have sneaked by with board information replicated on cards. Mistfall has a standalone expansion that I can't quite categorise as a game in its own right, so I've dumped it into the unseen expansion category. There had to be a borderline case, and it was lost in the mist that fell. Burgle Brothers has the most annoying box. Yes, I understand that it acts as a playing piece, the rooftop helipad offering escape after all. It could be packed worse. In a tin, Raptor gives you 2 Brunos for the price of 1. One day all game designers will be called Bruno. I'm down to 11 boxes, though we're not counting the last one. These are in no particular order. The games certainly aren't stored in order of purchase. The Big Book of Madness, Steam Time, and Festo sit on those shelves out of sheer convenience. As I record this video, the next game on the list is the last game that came into the house. It's also the star of the video before this one, or more of a superstar, Gravity Superstar. Victory or death is the rallying cry of so few games on my shelves. Chang Chang was another discounted game, for I favour the purchase of those. Legends of Andor takes us once more into the realm of the cooperative game. Extra storage not shown, of course. That's also true of this one, Fury of Dracula. I have to count carefully. 3rd edition, which is almost the same as 4th edition by all accounts, barring the painted miniatures in the later version. 504 is a game I bought for the loot that came with it. Definitely a video production item for the channel as opposed to an actual game. Hyperborea is another one of those covers that is slightly out of step with the actual game in the box. And here's Arkham Horror, purchased before the channel was a thing, before the channel was even a plan. Ignoring duplicate copies, the RPG, and the 2 games that sat there on shelves in the olden times, I make that 100 games, with more boxes on the way. Luckily, I have space on shelves for those boxes. For now.